voluntary social distancing was introduced on the 16th, and it was made compulsory a week later on the 23rd. At that time, during that week, were you content with the timetable, or did you advise ministers that the compulsory lockdown should have happened earlier?
All the things we were asking people to do were incredibly socially disruptive and incredibly economically damaging from the minute you start them. So there was obviously a process of discussion in government at multiple levels. We can go through, and already many more hours have been spent by people who weren't there commenting on the exact sequence of events over a relatively short period than actually we had hours to make decisions. What you're trying to do is run a very complicated period as a kind of jumped on question about this. There isn't a straight answer to that, and I'm not trying to give you a yes or no answer to that.
It's not an unreasonable question. Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you. It's not an unreasonable question to ask, because the government constantly said they were following the science.
Ministers at the time, who were put in an incredibly difficult position, in my view, followed the advice given by SAGE, which are clearly signposted through the minutes of SAGE, with a delay that was no more than you would reasonably expect for what are really very difficult things to operationalise and decide. I'm not saying now, and I'm not going to say at any point, to be clear, that in my view, there was huge delay between the advice that ministers received, given the enormity of the difficulties that we were asking of people and the practical implications of what was being done. Does that give you a clear enough answer to the question you're trying to ask me?
Because we know now that we were able to expand the testing capacity, we were able to expand the contact tracing capacity. So why didn't you advise that in January or February?
The idea you can suddenly switch this on, I'm afraid, is incorrect. And the way you run emergencies badly is to try and run them based on a theory of what you could do rather than with the tools you have at your disposal. And that is the way that we had to run it, and that is the way we did run it. And you can criticise it, but the constraint goes, if we'd wished to build this capacity up, we could have done so in previous years.
And you think that was the correct advice, just to be absolutely clear, given that the capacity we had there, it was the correct thing to say that we stop community testing on March the 12th. You stand by that advice?
Yeah, so the words that carry the most weight in that is given the capacity we had. That is, that given that capacity, that was, in my view, the correct advice, because that capacity had to be used for other things, which were, by this stage, we were already in a situation where there was a big risk. We were missing cases in hospitals, and we were not being able to treat people, and we were leaving people in ITUs without being diagnosed and so on. There were multiple things that this capacity had to be used for, and in relative terms, had we had infinite capacity, had we had test, trace and isolate, absolutely. There was no conceptual reason for saying we don't want to do this. It was entirely practical.